everybody. Welcome to Lights Out. I'm John Weiss,
I'm Andy Henderson.
and we are here today to talk about the job market as it relates to emerging technologies in today's industry. So, Andy and I have been talking a lot about what we're seeing in our networks. Lots of folks, of course, have been impacted by the pandemic, and people are trying to make heads or tails of what does this really mean for the job market and what comes next. And so, Andy, you and I were talking about, the unemployment rate, of course, it's dropped in July by about 1%. Now we're sitting at around 10% unemployment. But, it kind of sounds like a low number if you're not familiar with the socioeconomic impact of that, right? But, we're talking about 16, million people, right? A little bit more than that are out of work. And as well as I do in our network, this is really impacting manufacturing greatly, especially the technology side of it. So, some of the things that pique my interest here are, looking at kind of the skill gaps that exist and how organizations are starting to adopt technologies to fill some of these gaps. Would love to get your take, Andy. What are you seeing in your network, and what's the impact been like for you?
Yeah, I mean the current unemployment situation is interesting, but I'd say even before this pandemic, there's been an increasing focus on the skills gap and that the fact that people in industry, in particular manufacturing, are having a hard time finding the right types of skills to fill the roles as technology is transforming that industry. One of the things that I like to quote is a couple of Deloitte studies. I think the most recent one was in 2018, but they were saying that there's going to be 4.6 million manufacturing jobs that needed to be filled before 2028, and 2.4 million of them will go unfilled because of a shortage of skilled workers. And then to put that in dollar perspective, they say that there's going to be $2.5 trillion of economic output at risk due to the skills gap. It's astounding numbers, and then you add the current pandemic situation on top of it. I think it just exacerbates the whole problem.
Yeah, these are big numbers. I saw just to piggyback on some of this. It's really interesting. It's almost like a two-prong approach, right? Where we're looking for folks to fill the gap in the market or the gap in these skills, but then we're also looking at upskilling workers. And, on that one, I saw a really interesting metric. Informa ran a report with Software AG earlier this year, and more than half of employers that responded to the study said that the first step to embracing new technologies and essentially new business processes, the very first step in the way to be successful is actually to train existing employees, right? That's what half the respondents said, a little bit more than half. So really interesting, when you look at the combination of upskilling the folks we have and trying to find new people with new skills in the market. And to your point, there's a massive gap where some of these skills just don't really exist, right? Really interesting stuff. So, and super timely, of course, given everything that's happening today in the market, right? And so, in typical fashion, Andy, we love to bring in experts and friends and coworkers and things like this on the show. Today, we've got with us Melissa from Blue Signal Recruiting. Melissa is an executive recruiter for IoT and Emerging Technologies. Great to have you on, Melissa. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And you guys probably know this, but a lot of people may not. When we hear about the unemployment out there, that includes everybody. That is every person out there. If you look at the unemployment numbers for people with a bachelor's or higher, it's really not that high. So there's still demand out there. One thing to keep in mind, though, you're absolutely right. This has wreaked havoc. Our unemployment rate was, I think, down to almost 3%. Now we're, like you said, right over 10. So that is a big jump. For the people with a bachelor's, I think it's right around 7. It's still bigger than where we were, but not as affected. So just some things there to keep in mind. The marketplace is interesting. You were talking about bringing in robotics and increasing technologies and things like that. So on one hand, you're absolutely right that there's people that don't have the skills for that, but on the other side, the companies need to hire people with those skills. So there's opportunities when you have mergers and acquisitions. Same things happen. Unfortunately, some people are redundant, but then they also need to hire people in with the new company and the new skill set. So it's an interesting market right now, and tough and challenging for both sides. You're absolutely right. Companies can train the people they have, but unfortunately, that's not always the quick fix for them.
Makes sense.
To that point, about the bachelors, the 7% unemployment with bachelors being lower than the overall unemployment. Do you see that, or do you have the data, and do you see that across all bachelor's degrees, or is it, does the data get granular enough to tell us that even, because I would imagine that STEM related degrees, the numbers are even lower. Is that an accurate assumption?
Absolutely. If you have any type of engineering, if you're in engineering, any type of engineer, you're golden, right now. Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, sales and marketing are they're the first to go for whatever reason. There's more of those people that are having a challenge finding roles right now.
Yeah, interesting. So, Andy, you and I, we've been in the space a long time, in the industrial business, working with manufacturers and supply chain projects. We've seen lots of trends kind of come and go over the years, right? Whether it's been, creating graph models of assets as the big, flavor of the year, or whether it's been digital twin back, before that was even a term. And I'm not sure I still even know what that means in many respects, but maybe that's a topic for another time. So, I'd be really interested, Melissa, in hearing from your perspective when you're working with these organizations that are looking for folks with these technical skills. When we talk about IoT and we talk about machine learning and AI and all this kind of new stuff, from your perspective, what are some of the trends that people are trying to solve or focus on by hiring these people?
Connectivity is really big right now, which is what IoT is all about anyway, correct? So if you think about people are working remote, so things to help them keep their employees remote. There is connectivity with e-commerce. Think about how much that has grown over the last 6 months compared to the last 6 years. Anything along those lines are what companies are looking for. What can help them? They're looking to the future. They know we're going to be coming out of this, hopefully sooner rather than later. And as they're getting people back to work, what can they do to help keep them connected? How can we work this around? How can we network? How can we anything along those lines is what they're looking to solve right now. Those are kind of the trends kind of going forward right now.
Yeah.
So to dive into that a bit, is it primarily what we would consider as traditional IT fields, like maybe computer science, or is it do you think it's more broad? And to elaborate a bit further, I know in one of my prior roles in manufacturing, we were building a team and we were looking for mechatronics engineers specifically, so the folks that could understand the physical world as well as the digital world and marry those two things together. I'm just wondering, if you dig into, as people are looking for the folks who understand connectivity and understand digital, are they still looking for the traditional IT type fields, knowledge bases, I guess I would say?
They're certainly looking for that, but they're also expanding that, as well as electrical electricals, not necessarily just your IT, but anything, even on the mechanical maybe not as much. Um, but yeah, people are in demand right now. I mean, and it's across all fields. You were talking about, and maybe we already hit on this, but machines. There's also the e-commerce. There's also think about any sector that IoT connects everything. There's existing machinery and plants, but there's also the new machinery coming in. There's the IT side from the cloud and the web and all of that to help them stay connected remotely. But there's hardly any industry, any product that you can think of that isn't going to have some sort of connectivity. And as I'm saying that, I'm looking at my dog kennel, and it doesn't. But theoretically, you could have one that you could give water or food or open the door or things like that. So literally almost anything. I mean, think about even 5 years ago from our own personal house and personal lives. So, and imagine, and I'm sure you guys know this more than I do on the manufacturing floor, how much things have changed.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think of the smart connected dog feeders, right? That can dispense the treat from the iPhone and things like this, right? The
Yeah.
the amount of when we think about jobs, right? The amount of people and different types of skills and jobs that go into bringing a product like that to market, it's really a wide range of skills, right? All the way down to the bill of materials that go into manufacturing a product like that. Right now we have sensors in it that we didn't used to have, or we have radios in it so that it can communicate over Wi-Fi or BLE, Bluetooth. And it's interesting from the manufacturing side. Now we're creating smart products where they didn't used to exist. And then of course, from a skills perspective and a staffing perspective, these companies they're no longer just making a product. They're making a smart connected device, right, that exists inside of a product. And now they're hiring people that have these IoT type skills, where companies traditionally wouldn't have hired these kinds of people. Really interesting stuff. And so I guess one question I have, Melissa, in this kind of sea of people, right? If we think about LinkedIn and all the millions of people that are on there, and just so many of them are looking for new opportunities, what recommendations or tips do you have for folks that can help them stand out in this crowded market and help them find something in this emerging technology space?
A couple things. One is looking for a job can be a full-time job. And it's a little bit different if somebody is still actively working, because people that are actively working right now are slammed because they're having to pick up extra work. But people that are unemployed, really, we have a saying of from our end, it's post and pray. When you post an ad and just pray the right candidate will apply. There's kind of the same thing on the other end. A lot of people don't put the work into finding a new job. They'll apply and pray. So don't just do that. One, do your research. Decide, think about yourself. Think about what you really want to do. Then find out, look at what companies. Have your target companies. Have 50, have 100. These are your target companies. And really do your research on them. Follow them on LinkedIn, follow their blogs, listen to their earnings reports, anything you can do to get to know them. Then when you do apply, you want to, one, make sure you're customizing your resume to that role. How many people have, this is my resume and this is it? There's no way you can have everything you've ever done on your resume. It's just not possible. So if the company is in agriculture and you have some agriculture experience, make sure that's visible, because keep in mind your resume is most likely either going to be read by an ATS system, so by a computer that's looking for keywords, or it's going to be looked at by a person that may not know the industry, so they may not know that this company it does agriculture unless you're telling them that. So make sure that you are customizing it. Don't lie because you'll get caught and then that won't be good. But if you've got the skills, make sure that that's visible to the person on the street that's looking at your resume. Then don't just apply and forget about it. Make sure you're connected on LinkedIn with the people in that company. Reach out, find out who the hiring manager is. Reach out to them. Try to form relationships. And even before you apply, start networking. Networking is huge. And if you know somebody, and you have to be cautious about this, but if you know somebody that can refer you, somebody either in the company or that's well thought of by the company, maybe a client, a customer of the company, that's huge. That helps. But the reason I say I caution, because I can't tell you how many times candidates will say, "Oh yeah, I know Bob, and Bob knows the company. He'll put in a word for me." Well, the company comes back and says, "Yeah, Bob knows them, but he's not somebody he wants to work with. Good friend, but not somebody we want here." So that's something to think about. Just be cautious with that. But if you can do it, it is huge. Um, and then just really just do your homework. It's not a lazy person's job. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But start now. Even if company ABC doesn't have a role now, and they're a company you want to work with, think about it from a sales perspective. Think about the work that you put into to get a new client. It's the same thing. It's just your product is yourself.
Yep.
And there's a lot of things you can do. But there's also, if there's certain skills, right now is a good time. There's a lot of free resources or not as expensive. There's subsidized resources out there. If there's certifications, if learning a new skill or something like that you can have on your resume, so that you can say, you did something during the downtime, as opposed to, well, I was able to watch, I got up every morning and watched Good Morning America. I followed those. I kept up with current topics. That will be helpful.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, it's some real great takeaways there. I think, do your research, right? For sure. Spend the time. I like the analogy to sales, because at the end of the day, when you're looking for a new job, you're selling yourself, right? You're selling the idea that you're a premier candidate, that you're going to do the job better than anybody else. Doing some investigation and reading, 10K reports and looking at the investor releases and things like that. Not only does it arm you with information on what the company is doing, and who the company is, but it also signifies where the growth is happening. And it gives you an idea of exactly where these companies are investing. And they may be getting ready to bring new products to market, new initiatives to market that you didn't even know existed. Which of course they need people to help do that, right? So it could be a great way for you to uncover parts of the businesses that you never would have thought you could have worked in, based on your skill set. So really interesting stuff. Yep. I've seen a lot of people, Andy, I don't know about you, but in my network, I've seen a lot of people posting about, hey, I've applied for, 180 jobs, and I see those cool charts that I don't know what they're called, but I forget the name, but it's kind of like the line graph that shows what happened after this event and after this event, after this event. And ultimately it shows kind of the data around, I applied to X number of postings, and at the end of it, I got X offers, right? And it's the whole flow of what happened throughout that whole journey. One question I have is, for the folks that are posting that they have applied to hundreds of jobs or 150 jobs, something like that, would you say that that's normal? And, you really have to apply to a whole lot of places, and kind of hope you land a gig? Or is that maybe not the best strategy? I'd love to get your take on that. Yeah.
In general, that's probably not the best take, because it's very unlikely that if you've applied to that many jobs that you have, customized your resume each time, that you've done your research on the company, that you've followed up with the hiring manager, that you've networked within the company. So, the law of averages, I get that, and I get if you're you're in a situation and you've been affected by this. Yes, you want to do everything you can, but that may not be the most smartest way to work. You may have better success. If you can do that 100, but do it with a plan, but that takes time. So that goes back to finding a job's a full-time job, right?
Yeah.
So that just it takes a lot of time to do it right. Just sending it in. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a candidate and they had already applied to the company, but we were able to get them in because their resume got overlooked. The company didn't realize they were a skills fit for what they needed. So just be aware of that. It's not just an apply and pray. That's a new phrase. It's not just an apply and pray market anymore.
Yeah, that's very true.
Companies are very specific on what they're looking for, and you really have to meet those requirements. And a lot of times people have it, but the company can't see that from the resume.
I'm also curious from the company perspective, like where should companies be looking in order to find, because there's a large pool of people out there looking for jobs now, but also companies want to ensure that they're getting good quality hires and they're looking in the right place to find those diamonds in the rough. What should companies be doing, or what should recruiters be? Where should they be going? How should they be targeting their postings?
Yeah, and going off on just a little bit of a different tangent here, because we've talked about it a little bit of technology changes. So a lot of the people in the market may not have the exact skills. So if both sides can give a little bit, if you need this job filled and somebody has a certain skill set that's transferable, if companies would be open to that, maybe in 6 months they're going to be up to speed, where if you aren't open to that, maybe a year later you're still looking. But if you gave in a little bit, you could go ahead and get somebody on board that's a good culture fit that can catch up to speed maybe on your product. So an easy example is sales, where maybe you have relationships that the company's going after, but maybe you don't have experience with their product. You can learn the product, or in engineering, if there's certain software or something. Again, you maybe not know the exact product. You can learn the product, and maybe it's going to take a little bit of ramp up time. But right now, even though we've got this demand that's not being met, a lot of times, not always, a lot of times companies they're still looking for that perfect fit. So getting them to stretch there a little bit would actually help them in the long run. They're going to get a loyal employee who's excited for the new opportunity, and they're going to get somebody there working faster and contributing much faster than just waiting for that perfect candidate. We see that an awful lot. But in terms of where to go, first thing I'm going to tell you, of course, is go to a recruiter that knows your market and that can find somebody for you. But the thing with postings is, and for a long time, I have been anti-posting, because you will get either no applicants or you'll get 100 that aren't a fit, and maybe get that one. So postings are tough. There's not any one good place. One day you might post somewhere, and then the next day you post there, and you get a good response, and then the next time you don't. There's not a silver bullet to that. It ebbs and flows. And if people have search criteria up for websites, it doesn't always catch everything, so things get missed there too. So there's not a silver bullet out there. We have almost all the tools, and we're always grumbling about all of them. So, but you got to have them. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I think one of the strongest themes across a couple of the talk tracks here is really the importance of having a good network, right? You
yes,
know,
absolutely.
you mentioned having somebody, refer you internally. Of course, that holds a tremendous amount of weight. And, um,
Yeah.
I would advise the listeners to not ask somebody to do that if you don't actually have a relationship with them, right? It's probably not a good idea to just connect with somebody on LinkedIn and then immediately ask them to refer you for a job. It's probably not going to happen, and they'll probably remove you from their network. But that's always a fantastic way to go. I mean, truth be told, I've gotten many of my roles throughout my career based on my network and people that I've met and people that have referred me personally for things. And I've hired people through that way too, right? People that I work with know I have an opening, they refer somebody that they know, you know, in I don't think there's any, much like if you're a business owner, or just like in business, when somebody refers you to do a service for someone, there's no better way to get in the door, right? I think it's the same for finding a job. There's no better way than having somebody put their neck on the line for you and say, hey, he or she's pretty good at this. You might want to check them out. So I think that's a really important theme here. I think we're just about out of time, Melissa. Really appreciate you joining us today. Lots of great insights. How can people get in touch with you, Melissa, to learn more?
Ah, my email is mcoleman@bluesignal.com. That's probably the best way. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very well connected on LinkedIn, and I am always happy to network within the industry and happy to help out however I can.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, we'll be sure to put your info in the description here in case folks want to learn a little bit more. Uh, Andy, any closing remarks?
No, I'm good. It was great talking with you. Nice to get some further insights on the market, and some tips. It's great info. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. And thank you to all of our listeners. We'll see you next time.